I'm here today with Tony Stubblebine, and I've been really looking forward to this episode because he's previously the founder of Lyft Worldwide, which was, as I understand it, the first habit tracking app on the iPhone, as well as the first habit coaching company with Coach.me. And after that, he took over as CEO of Medium.com from Ev Williams. So he's had a really interesting journey here, and I'm really looking forward to digging into this together. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast, Tony.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Well, it's cool that you wanted to talk.
Well, let's start with we could start in a lot of places, and so I was kind of struggling with where we should begin. But why don't we start with the company you co-founded, Lyft Worldwide? How did that come about?
Oy. But I feel like I have to start 10 years later, or 10 years earlier,
Yeah,
rather.
yeah. Well, you know
Um,
what? Let's start 10 years earlier if you want to. You start where you want to. We'll let's end up with Lyft Worldwide though.
I think one of the things I like to just like expose for people is that there's two ways to become the CEO. One is to be a prodigy, and I don't have no advice on how to do that, right?
Me neither.
The other is to pay your dues. And I'm on a like pay your dues trajectory. And so I would say like one of the key moments that led to starting Lyft was maybe so 6 years earlier. I had been the head of engineering for a small podcasting startup called Odeo. And it was started by this guy, Evan Williams, whose name is going to come up because he's the founder of Blogger, founder of Twitter, and the founder of Medium, the company I run now. But this like moment in time, I had been his head of engineering, and pretty quickly we realized that we were building the wrong thing. It's sort of like at first they thought the problem was they weren't shipping enough software, like they weren't shipping fast enough. So I solved that problem for them, and then they realized no matter how much they shipped, it was never going to work, and so they started looking for a pivot. And the pivot, famously, that came out of Odeo is something that, we've all heard the name Twitter. Like we built the first version of Twitter in that company, and it's like 12-person company, and grew it to, let's say, 150 users. Like it was just this prototype of a small group of people that really liked each other. We saw some promise in it, and it got spun out at that point.
Okay.
But I thought I was there to be the head of engineering. And so when we spun it out, it's like we're spinning out a product with 150 users, and one of the engineers is leading it. You don't need a head of engineering. So I left. I left on good terms, obviously, because I stayed in touch with those people for a long time. And when they left Twitter, when they were done with it, they wanted to build new products. And I just happened to be ready to start a new company for myself at that moment. And I came to them. I hope we get to like be business nerds, but because there was this moment in time in startup land where it's just like you could have an idea and say, what if this worked? And you didn't have to have any more justification than that. And so I came to them and said, what if we could build a positive reinforcement layer for behavior change, essentially like a psychologically savvy habit tracker.
Mhm.
And they're like, wow, if that worked, that would change everyone's lives, right? In hindsight, I would not start a company without a really clear view of distribution and business model. I think that kind of like throw it at the wall and see what happens is like kind of nuts, actually. But it was an incredibly fun journey. We did kind of basically pioneer this genre of software. There's probably like 100 variants
Yeah.
of habit trackers now.
Yeah.
But we made the most noise and set most of the patterns that people
So
use. Yeah.
So did I hear you correctly though to say that you started by kind of throwing stuff against the wall, seeing if something stuck, but you don't like that approach anymore?
No,
Okay,
no,
all
it's
right.
terrible because what happens is you get into this you spend all of this time on the product thinking I think all of us are just obsessed with a better mousetrap, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't know the business model and you don't know the distribution, you don't know parameters that you have to
Right.
design the product for. So you end up building a product that works, but could never grow and could never make money. And that
Interesting.
just feels like a mistake. And this is like always tell other entrepreneurs when they ask me for advice, especially about behavior change and habit tracking apps. That's like if you fail at a company, what happens is everyone else who has the same idea later on reaches out to you for advice. Like I don't know, I don't know why they don't want to talk to someone who's more successful, but I would just always tell them whatever product idea you have is going to work. It will change people's lives. So I don't even want to talk to you about that. Like I want to talk to you about how you could grow it. Because if you don't build that into the design of your company, it's all just like a waste of time.
Yeah.
It's not that we did build nothing. I mean, we did eventually build a business. We did eventually get to profitability, but it was a small profitable business. And it was interesting enough for me that I ran it for a pretty long time. Um, but the connection, I sort of missed this. The connection to Evan Williams is like he funded it. He was on the board. He co-designed the first version with me.
Okay.
And around the time that I was ready to leave it, he was ready to leave Medium.
Mhm.
And I had just out of friendship, basically, always been really active on Medium, had been an advisor, and later had done kind of a business partnership with them, and knew and loved the platform. I might even be underselling it. So Medium is our goal is to just be a place where people can just write and
Okay.
publish and make it simple, like get rid of all the complexities. You shouldn't have to download software. You shouldn't have to install anything. You shouldn't have to build an audience first. Just write, and Medium will take care of, um, helping you reach and build an audience just on the
Interesting.
merit of your writing. So I'd been part of that, and I loved it, and I had like kind of backed into being a business partner with them. And then turned into by far the most successful person on the platform, not just as an individual, but
Hmm.
as a publisher. Something like 2% of Medium traffic was going through things that I owned.
Wow.
And the whole time, because I'm friends with Ev, I'm not just succeeding, but I'm like Babe Ruthing it. Like he's like, I think it should work this way. I was like, Ev, you're wrong. It should work this way. I might prove it to you, right?
Hmm.
Just like point at the fence
Yeah.
and then hit a home run. And I'm not, I wouldn't describe myself as um, particularly smart or talented. I just happen to be very good and interested in this one thing like I don't think you're right.
I followed Ev Williams a lot early in my
Yeah.
career. When I was just starting out, I don't remember exactly where he was and what stage, but it was late enough that he was able to describe how he spent 6 years, I think it was, at Blogger, kind of learning this first person writing, system, and then he spent years thinking about it for Twitter. And I remember that was really eye-opening to me to just think about, wow, like this is not somebody flying by the seat of his pants when it comes to designing this. Like he's thinking about the same thing for years at a time, and it really kind of showed me what you needed to do if you're thinking about this kind of product development.
Right. I mean, that goes back to like kind of my suspicion around throwing things against the wall. I think you're
Yeah,
exactly right. Ev is like a huge luminary in online publishing. I mean, he helped make blogging a thing at all.
yeah,
And then he helped invent the category of short form blogging, microblogging, which is Twitter, right? And even though Twitter has gone through its own chaos, it's like
yeah,
now we have three Twitters, Threads and Blue Sky
yeah.
are like on the same trajectory. Like, and no, basically like no one has thought longer or harder or deeper about these subjects, and there's value to that. I
Yeah.
mean, absolutely, we see the value, and I like it was weird to take over this company from such a luminary.
Yeah.
I had some track record that I knew what I was doing, but I just like it's this incredible like career blessing that I got attached to him early in my career and got to learn from him for almost 20 years now.
So there are a lot of different directions I want to go, but since we started talking about Medium a little bit, can you just help me understand what did Medium come out? Like it came out of Twitter, I guess. He left Twitter, he started Medium. Medium obviously is longer form, but what was his motivation to go from Twitter to a company like Medium? You know, because obviously there were other blogging platforms at the time. You know, can you just talk a little bit more about kind of where like the origin of Medium?
Even the name almost says they
Yeah.
were obsessed with the length. You know, it's like it's one of the things you learn in social media platforms is that the format defines what type of content you see.
Hmm.
So if you put a character limit, you get Twitter-like content. And so they were interested in, well, what does medium length content, look like? That I mean, like
I see.
literally that came up in a discussion. He wrote medium on the board and they said, whatever we do next, that's the name of the company. And uh, I think in a lot of ways it's a reaction to Twitter because Twitter can be so emotional and so reactive,
Yeah.
and sometimes really toxic. Like I've heard it described as like if you're a video game person, it's the PvP area, it's the player versus player area, where it's just like okay to like really yell at other
Yeah.
people and be mean to each other, right? I
Interesting.
mean, maybe some people occasionally want that experience, but most of us do not. We want a place for thoughtful and informed writing. And so they realized that, well, you need multiple paragraphs
Yeah.
to really get in. You don't need a book, but if you're just talking, if even just a singular idea, it takes a while to
So
express
it's
it.
between a tweet and a book.
Yeah,
That's
right.
interesting. I like
Medium
that.
length. Um, and what I loved about that team, I mean, to me, I learned something about innovation. Like you always think, all right, if I start a new company, like the logic is I have to build something better than they've ever seen. And
Yeah.
then my kind of programmer brain, because I was a programmer originally, I always jump to a new feature that no one's ever seen. Medium had no new features. What it had was this incredible level of design. And so they innovated not by inventing a new feature, they innovated by taking all of the features you expected and finding the essence of them from a design standpoint.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that's like my eyes open to this whole new world of how you could innovate on something.
That's really interesting. So to talk a little bit more about just kind of the details of Medium. So it's obviously a writing platform. What about other types of media? Like, is there a role for video, pictures? Nothing.
We describe ourselves as a reading and writing company.
Yeah.
And, of course, we're like, Um, I guess I also like on messages to get out into the world. I think it's okay to be counter narrative. It's actually, and so I'll describe why it feels counter narrative to us.
Yeah.
But it's like it seems scary, but your job as an entrepreneur is to innovate.
Yeah.
And there's a business strategy writer on Medium, Roger Martin, who has this phrase, where to play. And one of his observations is like competitively from a business strategy perspective, a lot of times the best place to play is where no one else is playing.
Mm.
Right? Because, like, yes, it's possible to compete, but competing is a lot of work. You'd
Sure.
rather go somewhere where no one's really paying a lot of attention. And so I would say, like, the current narratives right now are pivot to video again. And, all of media had a moment where that was a catchphrase. And
Yeah.
it's just come up again with TikTok for all forms of user-generated content. And then the other is AI. And so like we looked at all these trends and we're like, wow, people really think we're headed in the wrong direction. What do we think? And what we came to um, uh, is essentially there's just two human needs that we think we serve. One is uh, a desire to think, and the other is a desire to connect. And so, like, we take AI and thinking, like, you can't have a robot think for you any more than you could have a robot lift weights for you.
Yeah.
Like, writing is exercise for your mind, and writing is inherently healthy as a way to organize your thoughts.
Yeah.
Sometimes motivate you to do a little extra research, but really just to think. Even if you never were to publish it, like, if you care about being smarter, you will be drawn to writing. It is the best format for that. And I think way more convenient than video. Like it's hard to edit video, it's hard to edit audio, or probably like when you edit, audio, you might be using a tool like Descript that converts it to text and you edit the text and the audio gets
Yeah.
edited for you, right? Like text is a great format for that.
Yeah.
And then the other uh, uh, is that we just all have a need to connect with each other. And there's something that writing online has exposed, which is that it validates that each of our lives are really valuable. Like if you have this impulse to document your life and share it, you immediately begin to realize that there's
Mm.
other people like you that want to learn from you. And like there's just no more validating experience that you could have than teaching someone else. And what I think is
Yeah.
surprising to people who write online is there is no limit to what you can teach. You don't have to be a teacher. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a master of anything other than just to share, your personal experience a lot of times. So those two things are not made better with video, not made or not possible by outsourcing to an AI. It can't connect with you by, sending my robot avatar to this podcast. I have to be here with you, right?
Yeah.
So we just got really clear on our own kind of first principles and are completely comfortable being a reading and writing company, regardless of whether it's part of a popular trend or not.
Is it a big use case for people to write and not publish
Yeah,
on Medium?
more and more. Just speaking for myself, I have
Yeah.
like 800 published stories, which is a lot more than most people, but I also have like 800 drafts.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I did the same thing when I first started. I used Posterous a lot. I actually went through a lot of different platforms and and frankly now I'm kind of thinking through like where do I want to be? Where do I want to write? But I remember I went through Posterous. I really liked that. That kind of had a built-in audience to an extent. But I remember one thing that was nice about it was you could email. It was one of the first, I think, that you could email
Mhm.
your notes into, and it would either publish it or not publish it. And I remember I would do like it helped me refine certain thoughts to whether or not I chose to publish it at some point or not. And I published a lot, but I didn't. But I also didn't. I probably had a 2-to-1 ratio maybe of unpublished to published.
I our ideal writer is not needing to write every day. Just I think there's something kind of inauthentic about having to manufacture content. Like it goes against this idea that everyone has a life experience worth sharing. Like our ideal writer is out living, and then when they do something interesting, they come and share it. But if you are someone that kind of has this impulse to be a regular writer, you get into this need to like I call it like be able to manufacture it. Like even like some days you have your inspiration, but on a day that you don't, what do you do? And the thing that worked for me is I just have so many drafts. I was like, if I like, hey, I feel like writing just because I enjoy the act of it, but but I don't have a lot of time. I go to my drafts folder, I go to my emails, I go to long Slack messages, I go to answers from Quora back in the day, comments I've left other places, and be like, oh, I wonder if I can expand that. I think. That is a productivity hack of a lot of people. I'll give you actually a Malcolm Gladwell example.
Mm.
Um, I I thought his masterclass missed an opportunity to explain what really makes him successful. He gave a lot of tactics in his masterclass lesson about um, kind of the structure of his writing. But then just casually, he was telling a story about a book that had come out of one day he was digging through his file cabinet and found 5 pages of notes that he'd forgotten about from a day that he'd spent interviewing people in some town in Pennsylvania. And he was like, bubble. And then he went on to the writing process. But my head was like, tell me more about this filing cabinet. Like, and also, you spent a day of work and did nothing with it for 5 years, right? I mean, that just tells me that there's this incredible amount of unpublished volume before
Yeah.
any of it gets published. I thought I mean, everything that I know from my prior life in like habit coaching and coaching in general, it is that uh, like that productivity system was driving a ton of his success as a writer. And you know, that's probably generalizable to even those of us that don't aspire to be, you know, a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, I bet you're right. That's an interesting insight. So I want to turn back for a minute. Let's go back to habit for a moment, or to coach me and lift for a second. So I've found that one of the most difficult things in business is changing people's behavior, changing their habits, and I'm talking about team members primarily, but I would imagine it would apply to anybody. It's tough to do, right? It's not an easy thing to change somebody's behaviors. So what can you tell us about that?
Um, Yeah, I totally agree. Um, and you could think of this like as a manager, but I'll start with it as a behavior change specialist. I mean, that here's a product that will change your behavior.
Yeah.
We came from a world of like habit research. Like we had been connected to BJ Fogg at Stanford, who's like wrote the book Tiny Habits and is one of the biggest proponents of this, and he and biggest researchers too. And but he came at it from this very narrow lens of, okay, we define the habit. We've, you know, like people say it differently, but you know, there's like a cue or a prompt or a trigger, like all the same word. There's a behavior and then there's a reward. And this is like Pavlovian. If you can design your life this way, then you will rewire your brain. And then, like the slightly more advanced way is if you want to get rid of a habit, it's like, well, find the cue and get rid of that, right? Or if you can't do that, then you try to build replacement habits. That's essentially the box that habit design was living in at the time. So we came to think it was failing so much because it was so much bigger than that. It was actually like, you don't need habit design, you need a therapist. Like we were just like so often running into this. So the example that I give um, usually is this guy that we were working with, and we had a real tiny habits mindset. He wanted to give up sweets.
Okay.
And so he was like, okay, my goal is no sweets at all any day. I want to have a streak. Of course, he failed right away. Too big of a goal. So we were like, make it tinier. How about no sweets before noon? It's like, okay, failed right away. How about just no, you know, like no particular kind of sweet? And he said, yeah, okay, all right, I can have sweets, but no ice cream. That's what he told us. The very next day, he goes, oh, coach, you're not going to believe what happened. My family is vacationing in Vermont and they wanted to go to the Ben and Jerry's factory. So he didn't like no amount of making this goal tinier had any impact on him to the point that he couldn't even go a day without ice cream. And he didn't just fail a little bit. He went to an ice cream factory tour, right?
Right.
And so it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around a theory of this. And then eventually I ran into a coaching framework, DILT, D-I-L-T, DILT's logical levels, I think is what it's called. And it was like, it talked about the levels that you can reach someone at. And the baseline that we had been focused on was behavioral. But above that is belief and identity. And so imagine you're a dad in a family unit and you have a service mentality, right? It's like my job to make sure the family is happy, right? And imagine that that is at war with, I told my coach I'm not going to have ice cream today, right? It's like actually the problem, the thing that was getting in the way was an identity system. And so anyway, this is like kind of
I
like
love this. This is great.
okay. So that's why it's so freaking complicated, right? And it's
Yeah.
actually something trivial like a habit sometimes is better addressed with a therapist. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and I don't mean to interrupt, but so I've done some habit modifications. Have gone from a bad diet to a great diet to, not
yeah.
working out to working out. Like, and I've maintained a lot of these good habits. For me, and I wonder if I've done some of this unintentionally. Like, I think I did do some identity modification a little bit. Like I thought of myself as somebody who's strong, and so I want to lift weights and be strong.
Yeah.
I started jujitsu, and I want to be somebody that can move well and that
Yeah.
can, and so therefore these habits, like I've not changed any behavior for the sake of the behavior. It's
Right.
for the pursuit of some, I guess, maybe identity.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of what's probably happening psychologically for you. And so the problem is that habit design is very concrete and easy to reason about. Identity design, this is tricky, right?
Right.
Um, and
Sure.
um, I don't know. I like so the only thing I've really had any success with people is not to change their identity, but to help them accept an identity.
Mm,
It's a lot of times it's like you know who you are,
yeah.
but you don't like it for some reason,
Yeah.
maybe because you don't think society values it.
I
Which is
totally relate to that.
right. So we actually said this already about types of entrepreneurs. You can either be a prodigy or you can pay your dues,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And
right.
right. And I think that we mythologize prodigies, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to accept, oh, I'm not a prodigy. I am a person that's going to pay my dues.
Yeah.
But if you could accept it, suddenly everything in your life gets way easier, right?
Oh my God, I've got to tell you this. So, have you ever used the Strength Finder program?
I know of it. I haven't
Okay.
gone through it myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great, yeah, for anybody listening here, it's a good
Great.
like personality assessment. We will often give it to new employees, and we kind of and the idea is that you want to discover your strengths so that you can grow your strengths and not worry so much about all the things that might be weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so it kind of flips a lot
Yeah.
of these types of assessments on their head. In any case, I remember the first time I took it, I was early 20s and I hated the results. I wanted to be like the classic CEO, and so I just remember there were a couple years, maybe more than a couple, where I kind of fought with my identity, and it was these were not super happy years. I was really in denial about what my strengths were. I wanted them to be some arbitrary strengths that I heard were really, impressive or whatever.
Right.
And then I don't remember what exactly changed, but I remember I did change that mindset. I took the assessment again, and and I just kind of embraced, what these strengths were. I found that they actually made a lot of sense. They did feel very accurate to me. And just like you said, things got a lot easier after that.
Right, right. It's like it's a work with your assets strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like, why design a business strategy for things, assets you don't have, right?
Yeah.
And I think one thing that's like about that, as I've like talked to other people who've gone through that process, is a lot of times there's a starting belief or fear or anxiety that more self-acceptance will make you less successful.
Hmm.
It's like maybe uh your self-criticism is the
Yeah.
motivator for action, right?
Okay.
And so you're like afraid to give that up,
Yeah.
If
I
I'm
can see
kind to
that.
myself, then turn myself into a failure, right? And I just in practice it's not true. Maybe one of my like happiest moments listening to a podcast is I saw Tim Ferriss and Brene Brown uh, um, uh, talking to each other. And, I think Tim Ferriss is like famously very tactical, very like, find a hack, like very
Yeah.
like he
Yeah.
and
I
great
loved his 4 hour work week or whatever that
Work
book
Week
was
for
a
Our
long time ago. It
Body,
was
like
great.
all of his books. And like he was an investor actually in my last company. So I've co-written things with him. I really liked him. Somehow he has family near me in the Hudson Valley, and I ran into him at like a country gas station the other day. I really have a lot of fondness for him, but
Yeah.
I also don't think of him as like heart forward, right? Whereas I
Okay.
think Brene Brown would
Yeah.
be. But they had this exact conversation, which is that they had this fear that if they had too much self-acceptance, they would stop being
Wow.
successful at anything.
Yeah.
And that they were both having the same kind of realization in their own lives that the more they could accept themselves, actually, the more they were able to accomplish. And that's, I mean, Strength Finder is exactly that. It's because it's not just find your strengths, it's bet on them afterwards, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. It's really kind of the like I think Warren Buffett and his partner Charlie Munger, I think
Right.
they would talk about this,
Yeah.
periodically, and they would talk about it as staying within your zone of
Yeah.
competence. Charlie Munger would say something like, if there's no level low enough to describe how bad he'd be if he had to make his living playing the French horn,
Yeah.
so he doesn't do that,
Right, right,
Yeah,
right. And it's like, so we do have these examples. Like literally, at one point, the richest man in the world is very comfortable with
yeah,
what he's good at and what he's bad at, right? I mean, Warren Buffett, like that's a huge part of his
yeah,
life story. And the way he tells his own story is, I found this thing that's valuable and I only do it. I've heard that other things are valuable, but I don't know how to do them, so I don't do them.
yeah,
Like it is like he's not. Sometimes in coaching, we use the word like negotiating. It's like sometimes you're negotiating with yourself,
yeah.
and it's like huge waste of time, huge waste of energy. You just never see that negotiating in Warren Buffett. He's not like, oh, have I chosen wrong?
Right,
Well, I mean, thankfully, he has the positive reinforcement of having made so much money.
right.
And the rest of us have to kind of go on faith. Um, but I mean, again, it just keeps coming back to the value of self-acceptance, even in a high performance, high ambition world.
Yeah. So how do you approach coaching at Medium?
I wish. Um, so this surprised me. I wondered, what is it like? I'd been running a smaller company. It was not nearly as high stakes, and I had been much more involved, like literally coaching people. I was very much in a coaching mindset, just deep in it.
Yeah.
And so I wondered, what's it like to be a coach CEO? And what happened early on is that the company didn't need me to be a coach CEO. The company needed me to be um, an analytical CEO. And so that's what I did. I spent a huge amount of time in spreadsheets. Um, I mean, we're just to give you like kind of the context,
Yeah.
is that Medium had been very successful and then had tried a bunch of things that hadn't quite worked or they hadn't quite taken far enough. And that period of time was this period of going sideways, but also, getting a lot of cruft.
Okay.
So when I took over, it was just a straight up turnaround. And the only interesting thing was they chose me out of the community out of someone that had been successful there because they wanted to do the turnaround and then do something big afterwards. So
Mm.
sometimes you turn around a company in order to, just get a return on it and exit.
Yeah.
If they wanted to do that, they would have hired a totally different person than me. They were like, plausibly, you can turn around the company, and if you do that, then there's more vision to achieve. But anyways, the turnaround was we're losing $2.5 million a month, which
All right.
and at a time when venture funding had just disappeared. There was
Yeah.
no more money available to the company. It's just what money is in the bank account and our current team, our current assets. And we were losing subscribers. So our business model is a single subscription. So rather than having to subscribe to this person or this person and this person, just one subscription for the reader, and they get best of medium. A lot of that money goes to the writers,
Yeah.
but it's, based on who's popular.
Yeah.
Um, and so if you're losing money and your business is shrinking, that's a difficult place to be. And then the third is that our incentive structure was just incentivizing a type of content that we weren't proud of. So even if I were to turn around the business, if I didn't also turn around the quality, it would feel like empty calories. Like, why did we bother
Yeah.
turning a business we're embarrassed about in profitable? Like, we would have been better off shutting it down.
What,
So this
what, what do you mean by you weren't proud of it?
um, we're mission-driven business people, which means like we care about the Venn diagram of it
Yeah.
works as a business, but it also makes the world better.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have other interests.
Yeah.
There's other things I could do, and that's certainly true of
Was it just like kind of spammy type content? Like it would get
clickbait,
views, but
content mill. Yeah.
I see, I see.
I I think as an insider, I'm super sensitive to this, and I don't know how sensitive, how articulate people, how much people have articulated their own sensitivity to it. But it's, it's like, when people are yelling opinions at each other, and then you start to realize they don't even hold the opinion. They're just doing it for attention.
Yes. Yes.
And like, I mean, we saw this first with cable news, and then we saw it with sports, right? And so, like, if you're a sports fan, like you're getting sports opinions from like ESPN sometimes that like they're completely made up. It's like you take this side and I take this side.
Yeah.
Like, LeBron James is the greatest. He's not the greatest. And I like, but you could have flipped people. Like you could have the person yelling could have been assigned the other side and it would have been fine. You were watching performative debate.
Yes.
And but the thing is, like, sometimes you actually want to know the truth, right? Where's the truth seeking in this?
Yeah.
And actually, in sports, it's really exciting right now. There's this whole media ecosystem of independent former athletes who are giving like really authentic, like insider takes, and I'm like, I eat that stuff up because
Yeah. That's
that's
great.
what interests me, right?
Yeah.
So if we put money on the table and somehow gave it all to people that like just made up what they were saying. And not all of it, a lot of it, right? Too
Yeah.
much of it. Um, and so we had to get back to this, like we want authentic stories. We want people
Yeah.
actually sharing their experiences. And so, anyways, I had to
That's
do a lot.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm a part of two communities that are, I think, kind of interesting here. I'm a part of the wrestling community, and that's like I was a high school wrestler. I'm still in touch with a lot of my old
Sure.
teammates, and now I'm in jujitsu, and so I'm kind of discover. So I see both of these two communities. They're both niche communities. Like these are not mainstream basketball, baseball. These are these are for people that are practitioners who are watching. And what's interesting is with wrestling, it's very authentic. It's very I can't really think of the word exactly. It's like it's just the content is what you expect it to be, and you get this really in-depth content. You learn tremendously. Jiu-jitsu is largely the same. I mean, and for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like both of these are like wrestling. They're both essentially one is wrestling where you're choking somebody, and the other is wrestling where you're not choking somebody. And so
Love
with
this
jujitsu,
explanation.
yeah, well, it's there's two sides of the same coin. So with jujitsu, it's interesting though because it is trying to become a more mainstream sport, and so there are a few people in it that are driving a lot of eyeballs, and they're doing so by trolling and by kind of doing tactics that I don't enjoy,
Yeah.
but. As a marketer, I've been fascinated by kind of watching it and seeing, okay, I guess there is a case to be made for letting them, or I mean, there's no letting involved. It's free
Yeah.
speech. They can
Fine.
say what they want. And if you've got the best jujitsu practitioner in the world acting like an ass, making stuff up, being a troll, but bringing a lot of attention and essentially being kind of a heel, like in
Sure.
professional wrestling, he's making people hate him in many cases. And but and you know what? I don't know if it's working or not, but it is attracting a lot of attention for these folks who are doing it.
The internet's big. Like
Yeah.
we need different things for different people, right? And so what I care about when I hear that is I want to protect a place online for you who's like trying to become a better jujitsu practitioner
Yeah.
to learn from other practitioners and kind of be shielded a little bit from uh, whatever this attention grabbing. I just call it entertainment,
I agree with that.
even if the entertainment is to be infuriated. I mean, right?
I think you're right on about that. I
Yeah,
think it's at the end of the day, somebody like me might get uptight about it, but it is really just entertainment.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm not against entertainment. I
Yeah.
just am not really in the entertainment business. And I
Understood.
saw this important thing that Medium could do, and I had done it as a partner here of, protecting. a space where someone could just come and share their experience, and especially with kind of professional experience, hobby experience. There's so much we can learn from each other
Yeah.
when we're not performing in the way that this heel
Yeah.
example you're giving, right? And yeah, I'm also like old enough on the internet to remember like that was the main vibe here at one point, right? Like
Yeah.
03, 04, oh
I
05,
remember that.
right? And we were like, it was like, holy crap, everyone can have a voice. Let's help each other. And
Yeah.
then it got polluted a little bit to anyone could like have attention. Anyone could be an influencer, right? And that's like it just like the attention became primary. And I think like we've been able to make a business out of making the substance
Yeah.
primary. And that's just like it's we're in a competitive world, and so like maybe I should be saying my way is better than their way. But the reality is that we want probably both ways will always exist, and I just need to
Yeah.
create a home, and the Medium team, needs to create a home for the thing that we want to exist on the world. And
Yeah, I hope both ways exist because if not, I'm afraid of which one is going to win.
totally, right? Yeah, we'll allow it.
So, so can I take a guess here for on something? So you took over as CEO. There were some quality problems with the content. You weren't super proud of the content that was rising to the top. Did the paywall, was that a big part of the solution? Because I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's not considered a paywall, what you have on Medium. But is that like what was the role of introducing that pricing structure that you guys have in
Yeah.
sort of cleaning up the content?
Well, the pricing structure, which is Medium, is a lot of free content, but then some content that's within a subscription. The subscription is very accessible. It's $5 a month,
Yeah.
$50 a year, right? And this predates me. This was the
Okay.
really like the main pivot in the company happened in 2017.
Mm,
But no one had done this for a social media platform before. So then there was this learning curve, right? And I think the learning curve could have been faster, but there was always going to be one. And I think the reason that we did this was so important to the mission, which is that Ev, the founder, realized if it's an ad-driven business, then all of our incentives are for attention seekers. The
yes.
more page views, the better. And it's actually kind of like you don't want the writing to be, you want the writing to be clickable, but if it's too engrossing, you won't notice the ads. It's actually better for the advertiser that you're skimming the content and seeing the ads rather than you're like, this is the most interesting thing I've ever read, and you're
Yeah.
like blind to all of these ads. So you want a site that just like is constantly drawing in attention so that you can show ads more often. That's just like that's the business of the internet. So everything that like we think is unhealthy on the internet, like if you actually get to root cause, it's because the business model is advertising. Advertising leads to attention, to the attention economy, and then all of these other things follow from that. So I've said if we have a subscription, then we're in a different business. We're in the business of making the reader happy. And that's different than grabbing the reader's attention. And he was completely right about that. As soon as we had that business model, all of our incentives changed and we got really focused on it. But then we have these follow-on challenges. The first one is, well, how do you get content behind a paywall then?
Yeah.
And so we have to share it, like Medium, I think kind of was designed with the idea that all of these people are publishing for free. We need to convince some of them to put some of their content behind a paywall. And so what's the easiest way to do? We're going to share some of the money. And what's interesting is there's a world of people who are trying to make a living online right now. But next door to them is a person that just really appreciates an honorarium. We're talking
Mm,
to this guy who's a professor of medicine at Yale, and he goes, I'm pretty well off, but if I spend 90 minutes writing a blog post on the weekend, it's really just convenient to tell my wife, oh, I got paid for this. And that just makes it easier for kind of greases the wheel for it. So our problem was that how we were doing that revenue share was just incentivizing the wrong content. And we hadn't been able to connect the dots, but that was,
okay.
job one, 1A or 1B, for me was we got to change the incentives so that we're recognizing and then rewarding um, the thing that is our mission and purpose,
Yeah.
which is thoughtful and informed writing. And people can write other things on Medium, but we're not in the business of paying them with distribution and money. There's like a specific kind of type of writing that we want to succeed on Medium because we know it's not going to succeed anywhere else.
Right.
And that's part of being differentiated. That's part of where to play, part of, being going where other people aren't is easier to make a business. Just for us, it's like part of a mission that's worth, coming to work for.
Okay, so my guess was wrong then. So what was the biggest change that you made when you first came on? What do you think had the biggest impact on kind of changing the incentive structure and driving that higher quality of content?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is they didn't know how to identify it at the beginning. So it's like you have to articulate it and then you have to build a system to identify it. Because the normal way you identify um, content on a social media platform is what's popular.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
what's popular is the heel. Like as you're saying,
yeah,
what's popular um, is just like a lot of times is divisive misinformation, right? And so we changed our recommendation and curation system. We basically, like all of these platforms work on, essentially AI, machine learning, matchmaking. They're like based on the behavior we know about you, we can predict that you're going to like this article over here, right? Um,
mhm,
but normally those are all keyed off of attention signals, like based on what you've read, what you've clicked on, right? And so we just added one more signal, which is essentially a human expertise. And so the expert is not a gatekeeper. They do not decide for you. They don't say, Will, I've chosen these 5 articles, but they do just add it as a factor into the whole matchmaking operation of,
right,
hey, some humans looked at this and we really like the characteristics of it. Like we think that like a subject matter expert looked at this and said, this is cutting edge for the subject, or a more kind of generic curator looked at it and said, hey, this is thoughtful. It's like coming from an informed place. And we started putting those signals into the recommendation algorithm. And it just basically changes what does well here and what doesn't, and makes it possible for a person to just show up and write something and have the writing succeed on its own merit without having to build an audience first, without having to
yeah.
engage in all these kind of internet hustler stuff,
So
right?
then are the people who are reviewing certain articles, are they employees of Medium or is it more of a Wikipedia type kind of,
We do
volunteer editor type thing?
We do it both ways. So
Nice.
we basically look to our community there. In our community, there's publications that anyone can submit stories to. And that's, again, this is part of making publishing easier is like, let's say you're a paleontologist and you want to write on Medium, like usually you just throw it over the wall and hope the algorithm. But there's literally a publication of paleontologists that'll accept stories from anyone. The same, there's like a one for entrepreneurs, there's one for managers, like there's one for data scientists, for designers. There's like 10,000 of these publications. And those people are effectively experts in their subject. I mean, they live and breathe the subject. And so we look to them as the first signal of expertise. And on the most popular topics, I think we even take a harder look at them, like how committed are you to finding, the important stories in your subject matter expert in your area of expertise. And then we use an internal curation team that's like the double check on that,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like you kind of have to counterbalance everyone's impulse to hack the system. And that basically has allowed us to like do a 180 on the quality of Medium. Um,
Interesting.
and by quality, by the way, I mean what really matters is what do we recommend to you? Like there's a ton of trash on Medium. There's like spam, there's slop, there's all of this stuff is like published there.
Yeah.
But what matters is, as you as a reader, what did I show to you? And
Yeah.
we've just done a whole 180 on that. And that started pretty early because what's the point of growing a business if you're growing it on clickbait? Actually, I wondered how many of our subscribers when I took over actually preferred the clickbait. That was my big fear. I was like,
Yeah.
maybe they really want this thing, like they want the product that I'm about to take away from them. Uh,
I think it's a valid concern possibly, or maybe it could have been.
it could have been, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then the other piece of the company, this is why it felt so analytical to me, was uh, I I came in calling it role clarity, but I we only talked about one company, but I ran two companies,
Hmm.
both of them for the most part running on revenue. So they were small businesses, but I understand what it means to make payroll, and
Yeah.
especially when you're the CEO, there's this really tight connection between what you spend and what money you don't have in your own pocket. Can I buy
True.
a car? Or do I hire this person?
Yeah.
Do I pay this legal fee? Or, like lawyers are
Yeah.
always like, oh, we got to reduce the risk. I was like, yeah, I could spend $20,000 on that, or I could buy a car.
Right.
Right. And so you're like, it just really creates this hypersensitivity to like every dollar you spend is supposed to return a dollar to you at least, right? And Medium didn't, like most startups from that era were so overfunded. Like the value of money was so disconnected.
Yeah.
And so I mean, a lot of different words for it. I was calling it role clarity. It's like, here's your job and here's why it's going to make us money. And it's either going to make us money tomorrow or you're in the rare job that I'm willing to pay for it, even though it's not going to make us money for a year. But
Yeah.
there's no one here is not about making us money
Yeah.
because otherwise everyone will lose their job because there is no future. Like once the bank account goes below zero, there's no more money coming in. Like you have to run this as a business. And so like that was the whole rest of the job is how do you either save money or make money? And every single person has to be connected to that. So we had this internal we called it a ladder to the moon. We said every step on the ladder is $10,000. Doesn't matter if it's growth or it doesn't matter if it's savings. Like if you can cut the server cost by $10,000, you've we got another ladder step. If you
Yeah.
can optimize some part of the funnel, the sales funnel, great. That's another step on the ladder. And that, I mean, that for the most part got people headed in the right direction. And then I every day I was in our financial spreadsheets,
Yeah.
trying to figure out how we could thread the needle on profitability. And we did. I mean, just like for what it's worth, happy ending. First,
Awesome.
we made a $7,000 profit in August, which is so little money, right? Like
That's awesome.
for a 75 person company, right? It's like you can't even give bonuses on that, right? I'm not even sure you could buy lunch for the whole company. And but ever since we've
Yeah.
been, lightly profitable, much more than that, but
Yeah.
lightly profitable. And we have to kind of change our identity again to how would we operate if we don't need to thread the needle? Like, how
Yeah.
would we operate with a more expansive sense of ambition? But I always thought it was a two-step process is like, we have to thread the needle to profitability. That has to include the quality turnaround. Otherwise, you're on shaky ground.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, then you have an asset that you could do even bigger things with. And that's kind of the moment we're in right
Yeah.
now.
So this is interesting. It's kind of what you said about the incentives is making me think a little differently about the three. I guess they're the three microblogging platforms that exist today. You've got Threads, Twitter, X, and you've got Blue
Blue
Sky.
sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they all have, and I haven't spent the least amount of time on Blue Sky, but if they all have the same essential structure and they all basically reward the same activities,
Yeah.
are they all inevitably just going to basically take on the same characteristics?
No, I'm always amazed. This is like so wonky, but
Yeah, it
I've
is.
been involved in social media platforms for so long. And just basically, they all have the same basic structure. It's like there's a post table, usually we call it, or you might call it a story table or article table, but it's like where the content lives. There's a user table. Like if you just think about
Yeah,
like the database tables have the same names.
yeah.
Like like you could go from company to company. They all have the same database essentially. And then what changes is if you take any of these basic concepts, even just one of them, and you tweak it, everything else changes. And it's because at Medium, like I'll tell people a lot of times, the content is the product, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like we build the software, but
Yeah,
then people put content into that software, and that's what people's experience is.
yeah,
So you tweak one thing on a social media platform, and the type of content that succeeds and that people create changes, and therefore the whole nature of it changes. So um, I'll say like a thing I'm really enamored with on Threads is that the algorithm treats replies as first class citizens. And once
Hmm.
I realized that, I was like, oh, it's in the name. They always meant to do this. And
Hmm.
so as a result, it's really, really valuable to thoughtfully interact with other people's posts. Because actually, like you could do better. You could reach a bigger audience that way. And so
Interesting.
and like you follow that thread down, not to make a pun, but it's just that why do I publish? I publish for validation.
Hmm.
Like the validation is the first and most important thing. And so now Threads is this community where you're constantly getting validated and like really deep, meaningful validation. Because if you put a good thought out, other smart people are going to interact with you. That's amazing,
Yeah,
right? Blue Sky is like just a completely Blue Sky doesn't have that, and for that reason doesn't work for me.
yeah.
I think Blue Sky is much more successful as like a link sharing, has a much more
Hmm.
like leftist political vibe. I actually find Blue Sky to be equally angry to Twitter
Hmm.
these days, and I've plenty on my plate already to be angry about, so I don't
Yeah,
need more of that. It has kind of a different community, different type of behavior. You know, basically just on that one wrinkle changes everything about Threads. But what people say about Threads is it's way more performative. Like it's like TikTok for text.
Hmm.
And some people don't like that. And so I think what we've ended up finding is that they have different cultures, and if you dig underneath them, there is probably a uh, like quiet, subtle product changes that actually made those cultures. So
Yeah,
you know, trust and safety really got neutered over at Twitter.
yeah.
So it is a place to go yell. You know, like if some company does you wrong, which of those three places are you going to go post about it? You know, it's like, oh, I'm mad at my, you know, like electric utility today. I think that fits Twitter
It
actually.
does. Yeah, I was going to say the same
Um,
thing.
and then Blue Sky, I think, actually has pretty good moderation controls, and so it creates a little bit more of a echo chamber probably. But I'm a little bit out of my depth on Blue Sky. I like such a big Threads user.
Yeah,
But it's again, it's like it's built into the software, and so yes, are these short form blogging platforms? Absolutely. But these design decisions really
yeah.
like change so much about the overall experience.
Very interesting. So I had one other line of questioning I wanted to walk down here, and it's just about AI. I'm interested. Whenever I'm talking to CEOs, I like to know, are you using AI in your personal life? Are you finding value in it? And then the same thing, like, what's the role so far of AI in your product or in business? Really just kind of an open-ended question on, how is AI factoring into things for you?
Yeah, I was looking at our referral traffic and ChatGPT, clicks from ChatGPT have gone up 5x, 500%
Bet.
since December.
Yeah.
And they will probably be our third biggest
Wow.
referrer by the end of the summer.
Wow.
So like they're half of what Reddit is right now for us,
That's interesting.
right? And so Twitter is still quite large, but essentially it's Google, Twitter, and then a group of people, Facebook, Reddit,
Yeah.
uh, Blue Sky, Threads, and ChatGPT is just Pinterest. ChatGPT is just going to rip right through that cluster and be in the third slot after
Yeah.
Twitter, like almost, certainly by the end of the summer, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so something real is going on there. I think there's two, if I could like reframe this for people, there's two ways that I usually try to do it. It's like right now, one is right now we're hearing from technologists that are really obsessed with the technology, but they're not humanists. They're not good product people a lot of times. They're like, imagine what it could do. It's like, no,
Mhm.
tell me, like, give me an actual use case about how my life gets better. So we're kind of in this
Yeah.
transition point. And so I'm just really interested in the the other side of the coin. Like, what's the role of humans? What are we trying to
Yeah.
accomplish for humans? Because if you talk to the technologists, a lot of times it sounds like they want humans to be in like the QA role. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
AI can create 10,000 different posts and then notice which one is most popular and bet on that one, right? It's like, well, wait a second. How did it notice what was most popular? Oh, it put the humans in the role of looking at 9,999 terrible posts. And it's just like, we're just going to get flooded with bullshit.
Yeah.
And based on our reactions, it's going to optimize for us, right? And I don't want to be in the QA role. I want to be elevated. I don't want
Me
to be
either.
demoted, right? So I saw Tim O'Reilly was writing about this the other day. Like he's a voice I look to here. But mostly I just want like that's the discussion I want to have. What are you like? How is your life getting better? What are we trying to accomplish for all of humanity here? And I still hear just a lot of, hey, we're going to put people out of work. And I was like, first of all, it's probably not true. And that's kind of a lame goal. So that's one. And then, and I actually gave it like, something earlier about, why we're so comfortable in the current moment. It's like
Yeah.
humans still want to connect with each other. They still want to think AI
Yeah.
can't replace those things.
Yeah.
Um, and then, oh, and then the other is like, so I've been through a lot of hype waves in tech, right?
Yeah.
And I've never been steered wrong by waiting to be on the second wave. I just,
Yeah.
and so I actually think now is the second wave. That 2 years ago, a year ago, it was like very I mean, we can actually even see it. Like, how is our life better because of AI, the AI stuff that people were working on a year ago? I can't think of a single way, right? But now it has gotten a lot better. People have gotten a lot clearer about where it can help a product, how to design around the product, um, and uh, and they stopped just saying it could do anything for you. Like they're more clear-eyed. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a big part of our developer workflow right now. It's people are moving to a prototype first kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly, I'll just take a product idea and think, in what way could I get ChatGPT to kind of demonstrate what this might look like? And so instead of like, here's a brief, here's my strategy, hey, can you prototype this? Can you design this for me? I have to convince someone else. I'm just like, this is what I care about and why, and here's what it might look like. What do you think, right? Like, and we've done this even for software recently, where there's like some dynamic on Medium that we don't really like. So we like literally over the weekend built an alternative blogging platform for 6 people to play with, right?
Hmm.
And to have the visceral experience of what would it feel like to write if you shifted these dynamics, right?
Yeah.
But like, and we've used the group of us in this have used it every day for like 2 weeks now, off of 2 days of effort.
Hmm.
And I don't think it could be released to the public, but that's not the point, right? The power was that we're able to prototype it. And I think,
Hmm.
probably our view in the content world is that AI could do a lot for search, for organizing and categorizing content.
Yeah.
That those are organizing, especially, is very time consuming, and as a result, it doesn't get done. And if you had the AI do it, it might be imperfect, but it'd be better than sort of the undone state that, like our kind of human activities usually leave content in. So we're pretty, I'd say I went from like really pretty frustrated with AI and the hype about it and the amount of spam that we're facing from the AI
Yeah.
generated content to it's like, oh, now there's like something practical to
Yeah.
do, and that's exciting. So it's like as of 2 months ago, a huge part of how we think. And
Hmm.
but before that, it's just like it's not ready. There's nothing it can do but distract us, and
Yeah.
that just flipped for us.
Interesting. So, what can you tell us about what's next for Medium?
Yeah, I think we have to make the case, and I think we're ready to make the case in a much bigger way that this is that you don't have to be a professional writer to succeed online. That every single person should be writing. Should like writing is almost the best way to manage your online presence, right? It's like if you want an opportunity to demonstrate your value to the world, to demonstrate how
Yeah.
smart you are, your master, your expertise. Like who of your listeners doesn't have that need, right?
Yeah.
And writing is by far the most effective way to do that. I think, we've moved from a resume world to a portfolio world, right? And especially once you get into management, like GitHub is not your portfolio. Dribble is not your portfolio. Like you don't have visual artifacts. You have a theory of how you manage, of how you lead, of how you run a business. And the only way to demonstrate that is with writing. And if you write it down, then you've got this portfolio that attracts customers, attracts coworkers,
Yeah.
attracts employers. And it's a competitive world, and this is one of the professional hacks for jumping ahead of other people is just be the person that can demonstrate, how like that something other people don't know. So like we're in that world. We're shifting from a world that's really, I think, um, uh, obsessed with quitting your day job and making a living as a creator. And I think like people have soured on that as a thing to do with your life, and it was always a very niche goal. And getting back to just the inherent value of writing and sharing it. Like just it always pays you back. And I think it became less popular for a moment, and we see it on that upswing, and that's the wave that we're riding.
I think that's really interesting. Was there anything we didn't get to that you wanted to discuss?
I
I think we covered a lot of topics. Yeah, I
don't
think
like
yeah, we were kind of all over the place, and I learned a lot. I really liked this episode. Actually, one thing I did forget to ask is fiction like are there fiction writers on Medium, or is it?
any fiction writers. I
That's
mean, it's
interesting.
a writing platform, and like I just like we always just say we're happy if you're writing.
Yeah,
Like we're happy if you're writing on Medium. We're happy if you're not writing on Medium. Writing a comment is writing.
yeah,
Writing an email is writing. Like writing is writing, and it's just there's something
yeah,
inherently healthy about it. It's
yeah,
exercise for the brain, and we're champions of that. So if you have something fiction to write, there's a fiction community. I think because of distribution dynamics, because of
yeah,
how SEO works, that Medium is huge for professional writing, like professionals writing about your profession, which is different than being a professional writer, writing about your profession. because that does so well in search.
Yeah, as somebody who's done a lot of SEO,
Right.
that is absolutely, I mean, it totally matches up because, people are looking for how to solve problems.
Right.
It's like that is the, how do you do something? How do you learn a skill? How do you whatever? And a lot of that does translate into professional writing to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
It's good for your professional
Yeah.
reputation. I mean, I think sometimes we think about like how directly making money off of writing. There's so much of the great writing I see in that category is I wrote to learn,
Yeah.
or I wrote because I want smart people to work with me, right?
Those are great motivations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot more we could have talked about because running a business is incredibly complicated
Yeah.
and no one knows how to do it well. And so just sharing all of the failures could take days. But yeah, I thought we had a really good hour. I was like, it was fun to talk through this stuff.
Yeah, well, Tony, I'd love to have you back on at some point, and maybe we could hit that 5 hour mark.
Yeah, that's right. Let's do an all day one.
There we
Okay.
go.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.